Welcome once again to another podcast, ChatNAPT with the AI Chatterbots Chuck and Howie. Another gorgeous day here.
Oh my gosh, is it beautiful today? We should be outside.
You know, I couldn't agree with you more. Summertime is approaching.
Yeah.
You know, it's that whole, conference is going to be starting here pretty soon. All the science conferences, we're getting ready for that.
Everything's
How about you?
blooming outside. It is just gorgeous.
We're going to have another session here where we talk about our personal summer plans and share that with the audience. We're not going to have time for that today, but because we got a guest today that's going to take up all of our time.
We have a guest today that's over the top. I mean, the accomplishments this guy has had, incredible.
Yeah, he's and not only that, I mean, once we get into him, it's going to be easily 45 minutes today for sure. And he's a very interesting guest, but it's not going to be enough. He's another like we had with Paul. We want Paul back again, automatically right away. We want Kirk back right again. We want Peter back again.
Well, look, I just want to give the audience a little heads up. Chuck and I compiled a list of the guests we think we'd like to have, right? And then we trimmed it down to the guest we think we're going to have on each podcast for each episode for each season. We have 6 full seasons of guests lined up, right? Not committed, but targeted. And then we're working on those a season at a time. And then we won't return guests for the ones that have so much information to share. So this is good. We have plenty of material coming forward.
Well, that is hard because, we both have been in the industry for, like a combined 90 years, you and I together. We know everybody, basically, between you and I think there is probably not a person that's been in the business for 20 years that we don't know, quite honestly, that, we've gone to just about, you and I together have gone to at least 50 plus conferences over the years. I mean, between the MSC and the A2LA and the NCSLI, I've gone to 60 plus conferences in my lifetime, if not more.
Yeah, I started in 99. That was my first year that I went to NCSL. There's only a couple of years I missed there. And then MSC, probably since 2001. Yeah, 2000 was the first year.
Yeah.
So lots of conferences. And I've gone to Interfax and some other ones as well, right? Other industry trade.
Yeah, I've been to a couple of other ones that really never panned out, and then of course, when I had my golf club business, I went to all the PGA shows, which is not metrology, but they were trade shows.
I talked about NAM in one of our previous episodes. I love that. That was the first time I ever went to the Music Merchants show, and that was a blast.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We're going to be expecting Chris here in a minute, so I probably should get started on his introduction because
good luck.
Oh my God. Okay. Just in all seriousness, this guy has got a bio that is 4 pages long. Chris has been around longer than I am. He's 1 year older than I am, and I've known Chris for 30 plus years. Chris is one of the main people that helped me start NAPT. When I reached out to Chris, and he worked at Compaq at the time. And Compaq was a huge supporter of NAPT when it first started. Chris was on the original board of directors. When I needed to start a board of directors, he was there with support, with unbelievable support. Chris started out in the Air Force. He worked his way up. He's got 3 degrees. He's got a master's degree now. He started out in the Air Force, then he worked at NASA, at Kennedy, same place you did for a while.
Yeah, he was there before I was and left shortly before I started up there.
And then he worked his way up and he worked at Compaq, which later became Hewlett-Packard. He spent a very short time at your company, Transcat.
Yes.
Then after that, he went to National Instruments.
Now he just landed on our show.
There we go.
Hey, guys. Hey.
And perfect timing. Good morning, Chris. How are you this morning?
Doing peachy. We got blue bonnet season here in Texas, and it's a favorite time of year.
Yeah, understood.
I got a funny feeling. I could probably just sign off and let you guys talk because I see that in the background, you've got your guitar.
Oh, we're going to get into that.
Guitars.
Absolutely.
Guitars, they're plural.
I'm seeing awards in the background, right? He's got NCSL awards. He's got the Woodington up there. He's got the USF, PMEL's certificate I can see there, and his guitars. Now, and the Antique Museum for Metrology Instruments.
Oh, yeah, I got a bunch of that stuff. Yeah.
This is cool.
Interesting, my other collection.
What we did, Chris, is we tried in the intro to go through your bio.
Mm-hmm.
And, you've been around the block forever, even longer than I have.
Mhm.
Because you're, I think, 1 year older than I am I'm going to say you're 1 year older than I am.
Mhm.
But you've been around forever. You've got great accomplishments. You've been recognized literally by every single association that you've been with. You've got more awards than most metrologists have.
Yeah, I forgot Wild Heck. I can see Wild Heck there too.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he's what, the Audie Murphy of metrology, right?
Yes. Yes.
Can we call you the Audie Murphy of metrology, because you've got every single award
Mhm.
that is basically out there, right? I'm thinking, right?
I got a lot of accolades. Yeah.
Yeah. So that
just means you've accomplished a lot, right?
right.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. So with that being said, what are you doing now? Why are you not retired? What is your, why are you,
Well, I'm finishing my last year. Actually, I'm going to retire at the end of this year. I'm really unique in the position I am in, and I'm global technical manager. So I have laboratories all over the world. But where I'm in a position now that I've never been in calibration is, and I designs equipment. So right from the get-go, when the business units were, hey, we got a suggestion for a product and let's go to R&D, I get involved from upstream as opposed to downstream where, a calibration program is planned and the instrument's already done and okay, hey, metrology support it. No, from the very get-go, I can get involved and, suggest the methodologies, the test technique, the equipment, be able to, I can reproduce it into my laboratory. So that part is extremely interesting. I'm a geek. So
How are you going to retire from that? That's too much fun.
Oh, well, I got my other things I like to do.
Other
So,
interests, yeah. Okay.
yeah. So one more year and I'm out of here.
Okay.
are you sure?
Then what?
Then I'm playing out a lot in bands. I got a lot of grandkids keep me busy. I'm an avid fisherman. And my latest hobby, well, it's been a lifetime hobby, but I put some money into it. Now I polish and cut rocks. So, I got my diamond saws and my polishers, and I go out in the field and get me Texas agate and blue turquoise, and I'm just loving it.
You happen to have any samples of it right there in front of you that you can share or no?
No, not this. No,
Okay, just curious.
yeah, no, I got like everything else is just spread around the house.
Chris, right there's, not even an hour away from me is the Arkansas Diamondback.
I went there after we had our conference, and I didn't tell you about that. It
After
was
the board meeting or? when
yeah,
was that?
after the
Yeah,
board
yeah,
meeting.
okay.
Yeah, so it's the middle of nowhere. All right.
Uh-huh.
And, you get there and I had my wagon, I had my boots, I had all my tools, and I sunk up many times up to my knees in mud. I twisted my ankle twice. I was cursing everything. I still got a bucket of stuff I have to sift through, but I was planning to spend all day there, all day.
Did you get a haul or no? I mean, were you?
I got a thumbnail, something like that looks a little interesting. It's
You know,
kind
the
of
problem
bluish.
is you had the wrong tools. You were panning for gold and it was diamonds.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So I got out of there, but man, I had swollen ankles.
Oh, God.
If you ever want to do it in the summertime. But I tell you what,
Okay.
it was very popular. I mean, it was just amazing to see these grannies out there with shovels and they were getting into it. Oh, yeah.
So let's move on to Chris. We talked about that, and we said your retirement's going to be what you enjoy. But before you get to retirement, let's talk about what you've done for the metrology community. One of the things that I want to talk about that I think that maybe the last people that are not, like Howard and I talked about the people that we know, everybody that's been around for 20 years. Let's kind of talk about people that are fairly new to metrology, not the last 10 years. One of the things that you're responsible for, Chris, that is really huge. There's three major things I want to talk about, but one is the uncertainty calculator and the other software that you developed over time that are still in use today. A lot of people that are new to the metrology community don't know the fact that you're the one that introduced this software for free. And all these new programs that are out there, they're all based on what you designed some 30 years ago.
Yeah. At the time when the measurement uncertainty, well, actually, let me go back to this is during the Compaq days, and we didn't have a lot of engineers. And so we were tasked in doing data sheets, calibration data sheets. And so I deployed this to my lead and technicians, my senior technicians, and they found a lot of inconsistencies, percent of reading, percent of tolerance, floor, all that was just haphazard, whatever a manufacturer called it. So that's when I developed the tolerance calculator. So that was the first one that was out there. And after that, was when we started getting to uncertainties. And, you know, the only thing out there at the time was a very expensive program from Dr. Carl Castro. All right. And so I developed my own, you know, and this was in the days of VBA3. And so I petitioned Compaq to make these freeware, you know, to the metrology community. The only request that I ever had was back then I would have a fax to justify my time, you know, and show them, hey, you know, who was using it. So I got a book buried someplace. I think it was over 38 different countries I had faxes from. I mean, from standards laboratories to mom and pop shops. It was just great doing that. And then the last one I did was a mismatch uncertainty calculator for doing RF. You know, worked a lot with the Sandia folks and developing that.
I'm actually going to have a question related to that later.
Oh,
So
okay.
go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah. So yeah, it was all in the freeware arena. I never made any money off it. I did a lot of training for folks in different laboratories, you know, that I would be asked to come out and participate in. So it was good. Both of them, Tom's calculator on certain and mismatch. I went to a lot of revisions from input from folks, and it's still available out there, which is just absolutely amazes me.
Yeah, I still see it from the, you know, I deal with a lot of people too, and when we ask them to submit to us what they did for their uncertainty budget, a lot of them people will submit the uncertainty budget in your particular tool. I get a lot of your spreadsheets sent to me a lot, believe it or not. It's still a tool that's widely used. So the other thing I want to talk about real briefly that I'm really proud of as well is something that you were headed up, and that was getting our profession recognized by the Department of Labor. You want to touch on that real briefly for us?
Oh yeah. Well, this is about 2 decades in the making. You know, real quickie side story. When I was in the high school, I went to my counselor because I wanted to be a forest ranger, and he pulled out a book. It was called the Occupational Outlook Handbook, the OOH, and he went through it and he says, "No, you don't want to become one." I says, "Well, why?" And he says, "Well, projected job growth was like -20 because everybody wanted to be a forest ranger." Well, I think it was after I spearheaded the CCT program. We were looking at public domain guidance, you know, as far as public domain, you know, what is the field going to? So I went to the Department of Labor and I queried the calibration technician, calibration technologist, whatnot, and there was nothing there. So I started getting interested in it. So I found out there's a thing called the SOC, Standard Occupational Classification System, the Department of Labor uses. And based on that, they will generate occupations for the Occupational Outlook Handbook. So I went into the SOC, and obviously there was nothing. There was absolutely none. And then I read about it, and that every 10 years, they would update it. And I started reading more, and that you could solicit the SOC on occupations. I says, well, that's great. I says, but I can't do it by myself. So I reached out to folks at the ASQ, Measurement Quality Division, folks from MSC and NCSL. We developed a Tiger team. And we wrote up a 12-page proposal of why we should be recognized in the SOC and ideally keeping the eye on the prize, the occupational handbook. We were turned down. This was in
2006, right?
Yeah, around that time frame. Yeah. And the reason was that they thought that there was not enough people in the occupation to justify any action. All right. And so, boom, and that was it, closed door. So I put it aside, you know, went out my happy ways for years and years. And then all of a sudden I got a call from Greg Gugula from NCSL saying, hey, you know, they're taking in information for the SOC again. I said, oh my gosh.
We've been down that path.
I remember that. So I really thought about the problems that we had, you know, in justifying it. And at that time, I was not versed in a lot of things in social media. And then one day it occurred to me, boink, LinkedIn. LinkedIn, when you take a look, they have people that say that their occupation, I'm a calibration technician, I'm a calibration engineer and stuff. So I did some data mining in LinkedIn, and I was able to produce tens of thousands of people that have the occupation. So based on that, okay, so I took the remarks from the 2006 SOC rejection, added to that and then really pumped it up with social media and this. So I presented it, didn't hear anything for about 3 months, and all of a sudden, point that they were accepted. And they did not accept metrologists.
Yeah, they didn't accept all of the entries, but they accepted 2 or 3.
They accept calibration technicians and calibration technologists.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Chris, I was on that original committee with you. You chaired that committee for NCSL, put a lot of hard work into it. You carried that torch and made it happen. So thank you for that.
Oh, I tell you what, it was a labor of love. And, you know, what I was tickled pink is I knew once the SOC had accepted it, the occupational outlook handbook was next. So they didn't do it that year, but the next year we have the occupational outlook handbook. I sent you guys a link. Did you want to show the link just real quick on one of yours?
We'll make it available in the in the notes when we do the editing.
Yes, because in the occupational outlook handbook, it tells you what it takes to become a calibration technician, you know, what the job expectation and growth is, what you can expect to be paid. You know, so the nice thing about it is the occupational outlook handbook is by far the de facto standard that guidance counselors, you know, and people that are given instruction to people and where, hey, guy comes in, I like lasers and I like, hey, look at this one here. There's calibration occupation on here.
I mean, that's a thick book, right? So how are they finding that? First of all, it's great that it's getting into the hands of guidance counselors because I was, I was raised in the Chicago area, good public schools, but I don't remember spending a lot of time with a guidance counselor on what my future was going to be.
Sure.
So whatever, maybe I got a miss on that one. But with that in their hands now, with those entries in there, there's a chance to get it exposed to young students. How do you find that amongst the myriad? I mean, it's a needle in a haystack, right? Trying to find that particular career field among the rest.
Well, you know, that's the nice thing about the handbook is you can do a sort on buzzwords, you know, things. So it's like I said, I like lasers and I like to do that are some of the buzzwords that will appear in the occupations. And one of them could very well be the calibration technologist.
You know, the thing that I think I should add to this conversation, aside from that, is, you know, becoming a calibration technician right now really has never been a better field to enter in with minimal experience. You know, we've been down this road going on for a good 10 years where the qualifications of the military providing us with qualified calibration technicians has been, you know, diluted to a huge number. And so companies are being forced to train their own calibration people. And so people coming into the industry are being trained, if you will, as we all know, by their employer. And there is a great opportunity for those individuals that don't want to go to college, that want a great career field to become calibration technicians.
And I can tell you that's what we've done at Transcat, right? We have Transcat University in Houston that we've developed. We're partnering with Sign Calibration for the, you know, theoretical pieces of that for the training modules. And then we do application transition with mentoring in the labs on the job experience, right? Typically what we're looking for is people who have had exposure to instrumentation. They've worked with that. If you're, you know, working on cars as a teenager or, you know, in your teens and 20s, that's something that you want to learn more about. You've got the exposure to the instruments. You know what they're used for. That's half the battle. Bring you in and teach you the rest for calibration and traceability. Same thing with people who are working on production lines somewhere, right? And they're tired of that monotony, but they see what the instruments are doing, and now we can bring them into the fold. So there's great ways for people without direct calibration training to get into metrology.
Absolutely. I remember when Lee suggested that, you know, about the university, and, you know, when I left Transcat, I left a lot of reference material. And one thing that's next time I visit the lab, I got 2 boxes of original HP application notes from the 70s, 80s and stuff. They're absolutely just fabulous gold mine. But another thing about metrology and education, remember the metrology CD?
Oh yeah, I was on that committee.
That was a good, got the
full careers in
information out
metrology.
there. Yeah. I thought that was an excellent.
It was fun. And what I liked about that too is that they had little clips of interviews with people in the industry. Talking about how they got into it, right? And that was pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, you were interviewed. I was interviewed. Yeah, a bunch of folks were.
So, Chris, I have a bad memory, and I know I've known you for 30 plus years.
Hmm?
How did we meet?
I think it was an NCSL, and I believe I was sitting in an audience. I don't know what the session was, a presentation, but I remember this gorilla getting up and just challenging the speakers. And I think, who is that guy? And
Yeah.
I think right after the session, I think I came up and I shook your hand and I says, "Hey, that was kind of ballsy what you said," and we just hit it off from there.
Yeah, I talked about that in the previous episode where I got heckled from the audience, and it was Chuck that did that.
It was Chuck.
And it's not that he's trying to, poke fun at anyone. He's actually challenging the thought process and saying, what is it that we're trying to get to?
I wish I could remember that, because honestly, that's a memory I wish that I could recall. But
Mhm.
I have other memories I recall with both you guys, and I think that's what I want to share with the audience is, I've known both you guys a long time. Obviously, Chris, you and I have known each other just maybe a day or two longer than I've known Howard.
Mhm.
But one of the things that I owe you a personal gratitude for is, when I started NAPT going on 30 years ago now, you were there. I made a phone call, and you didn't even take a second to say yes, you would help me out. You were right away. What I can almost imagine you saying, "What do you need from me?" And you got Compaq to sponsor us, with computers, and you've got Compaq to give us our first set of artifacts. I think the very first kit we did was a DMM, and that was one that you donated,
Yep.
a 5.5 DMM that you donated from your storage that you guys had, and that was our first artifact. And the other thing that people don't know is you wrote the very first set of software
Yes.
for doing the reports.
Mhm.
Now, granted, we've migrated about 50 times.
Which is no easy feat, by the way. We're not talking about just the coding that could be complicated, right? But the content.
Yeah, and the
Very
math.
detailed.
Yeah, and during that time, we pioneered the in, within, and out. That we've had a bunch of published papers and really kind of set the standard for industry.
Yep, and everyone copied that from us, Chris. And I love that say, because everyone uses that algorithm, and in a lot of other papers and a lot of other, I see that graph used all the time, and that's something that you developed, and with in conjunction with, I don't like to take credit for it, but you and I, we spent many hours talking about how we're going to create these and what do we want for statistics, and because they didn't have 13528 back then.
No, we didn't.
So we had to come up with what the rules were, and they did have a paper that was written in, do you remember who it was? Perry? Was it Dr. Perry?
Oh, I think you're right. That rings a bell.
I don't remember but it was a reference document for doing statistical analysis for eliminatory comparisons based on a data set. I apologize, my memory is not what it used to be. But anyways, my point was, Chris, is that I remember when we had our first board meeting in Minneapolis. Everybody came to Minneapolis, and we broke into sessions, and we wrote the quality manual, and we had the whole thing done in a weekend. And boy, that is one of the best memories I have, is how the metrology community came together. The people that I come to know and trust all got together, came to Minneapolis on their own dimes, because NAPT didn't have two nickels to rub together at that time.
In the beginning,
Yeah, and they wrote the quality manual, and they got people, and they talked about pushing NAPT together. So, there's a lot of times I get credit for NAPT, but the truth is the metrology community is what built NAPT.
Yeah, community.
I had the same analogy with the CCT program. When I was challenged by Phil Stein, to develop the certified calibration technician program, I took the challenge. I wrote up the proposal, one from the board of directors for ASQ, and it was accepted. So based on that, I pulled in folks from the metrology community. I remember we had one in Washington, D.C. that was fabulous. We had representation from mom and pop shops up to DOD. We had NASA folks there. And I can remember when we were first described what we want in a CCT program, that we had yellow stickums. And this was a big conference room with a bunch of windows, and you could see out the windows. They had so many yellow stickers. We had such good interaction. It was phenomenal from the metrology community. And so afterwards, well, we had workshops up in Milwaukee at ASQ to develop the body of knowledge, develop the test questions stuff. And these were all people that just volunteered, that just came from all walks and places of life. And that's how we developed the questions. We had psychometricians to help just lead us what is involved in writing questions, and what we wanted as far as to cover the body of knowledge and stuff. So a lot of people said, wow, you created CCT. No, I heard it. A bunch of metrology folks.
But that's what it takes, right? Somebody to corral it.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, there's a lot of involvement from the community.
Do you think that a lot of that goodwill?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have my personal opinion, and I don't want to influence the two of you guys, but do both of you guys, have any thoughts that volunteerism that was, very much the thing of the norm years ago, is that been decreased in your opinion over the last 10, 15 years?
I think it has. I think you look at the trade shows and the reduction in attendance, having a lot to do with social media presence and online videos, which then separates people from being more active and volunteer type of activities.
Yeah, I see it. It was uncommon to be involved with 2, 3, 4 committees, NCSL or whatnot. And I see these committees, they're down to like 5 people times 6 people. They're just, we need help. We need volunteers. So yeah, I have to concur, Chuck. I think the expectation of giving back to the profession isn't as strong as it once was.
So the work's not getting done. It needs to get done.
Yeah, essentially.
Correct.
A lot of work like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a sad thing, because there's still a lot of things that we want to continue to grow, because we're seeing a lot of new technology. The quantum physics, for example. There's a lot of new technology that's coming out, and the leaders of this our profession, if you will, where are they? I mean, Chris, you're retiring, right? Who's going to replace Chris Grachanen? Who is the new Chris Grachanen out there? Again, I'm not trying to be negative, but who's going to replace these people that are retiring? I could give a list of 20 people that I know are retiring this year alone. And who's going to replace those 20 people? I don't see it, honestly.
Yeah, but I don't see AI filling that gap either.
No, certainly not.
Yeah, I recently I'm going to share with you a program that I did some co-pilot training, and you know what? AI makes mistakes.
Yeah,
makes drastic mistakes. You got to train AI, and you got to Reagan? Trust, but verify.
Yeah, exactly. Well, interesting. Okay, so we've covered just about everything professionally. I think we can give acknowledgments. Howard, do you agree? Do we need to bend over and any more Howard?
Oh, no, come on, shit.
Look, we haven't even scratched the surface on the number of awards, his fellowships, everything that he's accomplished. There is so much. You can go read that, right?
Yeah.
Nothing to take away from you, Chris. You've done a phenomenal job with your career and volunteering and making things happen. But we want to get into more of the meat of things, of what you do on a daily basis and how that impacts. Well, let's start with that, right? With you being on the board of directors again. Why did you decide to come back? What attracted you to that?
Well, I saw that there were needs, like a company like NI, globally, that as far as proficiency testing was typically done by predecessors in a haphazard way. And the consistency across laboratories, like when I first came over with NI, we had 4 major laboratories. We had in Texas, we had in Hungary, we had it in Malaysia, and we had in China. Each one was a silo. Each one had their own quality systems. Each one, yes. Well, and they were all accredited. So that was one of the things that I was tasked in having to do, was to bring it all together under one umbrella.
So there's a challenge for you, right? Because the whole concept of ISO 17025 is to have a standard that's accepted by all. And now you're in a position where you're seeing different countries and how they go through accreditation and how they interpret 17025, and you're seeing differences, right? In the way they operate.
It was inconsistency. It was a lot of folks didn't know what they didn't know. So bringing it into one umbrella with both the uncertainties and to keep them consistent across so that we can leverage. If we have downtime in Hungary, I can ship things to Malaysia and know that I'm doing the same uncertainties. And we just brought aboard our newest laboratory in India. And so we've gone through the initial accreditation based on what we'd learned from our other laboratories and passed first time.
So I got to ask you, just thinking about different countries, we're sitting here talking about the challenge of finding technicians to grow into the U.S. labs, right? Whether they're internal or commercial labs. What are other countries doing? How are they finding?
Oh, they're and this is great. I spent a lot of time in Debrecen. That's where our laboratory is in Hungary, and they have technical institutes. All right, specifically catering what is the need of Hungary. And there is definitely, I don't want to say career fields, but there's definitely education pursuits to become educated in metrology. So they're hardcore, they're embedded in that, they're accredited, and it's just not one laboratory or one institute in Hungary. It's spread around Hungary. So you're able to then bring these people into the metrology community. And in Malaysia, I saw a lot more mentoring, where they would bring folks in at, a reduced rate because they're not putting out widgets and stuff, but half their day would be into mentoring, to be, with a person there specifically to groom them into a position with the guarantee that at the end of your mentorism and you show certain qualifications, you're guaranteed a job.
And it's like an apprenticeship.
Yeah, exactly. And a very good job. I saw the same type of apprenticeship in Shanghai in China.
Okay.
The same thing. So
interesting. Yeah.
And
that's really what I think it comes down to, is you've got to have that pass it on type of process.
Yeah, and unlike any other country besides the U.S., I never saw anybody within these laboratories that came from the military.
Yeah, I figured that is probably the case.
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting. Okay. Well, the other interesting thing about what you do after life, we want to talk about is we touched on before, is your guitars. I said I'm going to back away, and I personally know, Chris, that you love playing the guitar.
Absolutely.
Chris, how is it that we've never jammed all the years we've got each other?
I never drank guitar. You never drank your drums.
No, I don't drink the drums.
You don't drink the drum. But I gotta be honest. I played guitar all my life. I was an acoustic guitar player. I grew up in America. That type of genre. And then my girlfriend, we went to visit her brother, he was Sergeant at Arms in the Banditos. But he's Mexican. My girlfriend's Mexican, and he is my guitar guru. He has and played Pink Floyd on his 1987 red Strat perfectly. So I says, okay. So it gave me an old Rickenbacker guitar, electric guitar, and I never got into electric guitar. But all of a sudden, things started to click.
How about that?
And then I bought my first Strat, ES 335s. I got 10 guitars, more than 10 guitars. I got me one of my favorites that it took a long time to fix was a 1982 Glenn Campbell Special Ovation 12-string.
I had an Ovation years ago.
Well, let me show you.
I'm
going to grab it off the wall just to show you.
Yeah, the round back. That's pretty cool. I've messed around with it, but I am clearly not a guitarist.
You're a drummer. We all know that you're the drummer.
Yeah. Now that's a beautiful guitar.
It's just beautiful.
It is, and it has a great sound.
So,
Chris, I thought you were going to perform for us. What happened?
No. That's for the next. One. Okay. Well, one of the opportunities, I started going to I do a lot of my own music. I play out and stuff. But one of the things that I was very happy is I brought the gift of music to my grandkids. My granddaughter, my girlfriend's grandkids, but I'm grandpa. I taught them all how to fish. None of them ever learned how to fish, but I bought them I bought Squire electric guitars, cheapos, and amplifier, and we would go out in the garage and we would start jamming. And these guys have just phenomenal. You know,
Man,
they got
cool.
they got those big spidey fingers where they can span 4 or 5 frets at the same
Oh,
time
yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
But we'll go into one of the favorite. We do of course Pink Floyd, a bunch of stuff there, but Carlos Santana, we do some Carlos stuff. Santana is
Yeah.
just amazing, and I'm just tickled because they've just gotten so good. And two of them are going to join the Marines this summer, but they're going to have that gift the rest of their life.
Nice, nice.
Good job.
Well, now we get to move into the personal questions where we get to embarrass you.
Oh shit, okay. Oh,
So-
I can't say shit.
Well, not for the first question that we'd like to ask our guests, and we got a couple questions we always ask every guest.
Mhm.
The first question that I'm going to ask, and then Howard's going to ask one. We're going to rotate. We'll see how long it takes you to become embarrassed.
Okay.
What is your favorite? I know you had a ton of them, but if you could nail it down to one best moment that you've had in your metrology career, besides meeting
Oh.
me, of course,
Besides it.
what would that moment be?
We call it the
Well,
4M, right? We're using alliteration called the most memorable metrology moment. What
Well,
would that be for you?
it wasn't direct. It was inferred metrology, and I know Howard, you're going to appreciate this. And at the Challenger, I was working. NASA Lewis, John Glenn went down to Kennedy Space Center. We had the layoffs, and we had all the problems with Rocketdyne and stuff. And then Discovery was on the pad, and we were all out there. The CIF building, you can't quite see. You have to go up on the roof to be able to see it.
Yes, that's what we
And
do.
yeah, and so
Even though we got
everybody-
in trouble for doing that, we still did.
yeah, we did. Somebody else got in trouble. But I mean, arm in arm, I mean, the janitors, the VPs, everybody in the laboratory, that supported this. When we saw it doing and then all of a sudden, and then take off and, see the water deluge and you feel your shirt ripple from the sound and stuff like that.
Yeah.
To me, that made what I had worked for in metrology, and knowing that, I contribute to that flight. That was probably the most
That's a proud
satisfying.
moment for sure.
Yeah, it was.
Awesome. Now, see, I thought you were going to talk about your silver Snoopy.
Oh, that I didn't get?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, okay.
It's still, you were nominated, right?
Yeah, long story short, when I first started at KSC, I had my supervisor from John Glenn came down. His name's Mike Maxwell. Yes.
I love
Did you ever
Mike.
know? Yeah, Mikey.
Mike, I didn't work directly for him,
Uh,
but he was an amazing person.
Oh, Mikey was just phenomenal. And when I first came down, I was electrometrologist. Then we had layoffs, of course. And there was need in the VisD lab. There was dimensional lab. There was need. And Mikey said, just go, just wherever you need it, just go. And we had so many senior technicians that took me under the wing and mentored me. And so, long story short, we used to do a lot of those big old heist gauges, the pressure gauges.
Calibrated a ton of those.
Yeah, and so one of the things you had to make sure was it was clean. You didn't want to have any hypercol or any toxics in it. So they would go through.
Monomethyl hydrazine, whatever.
Yeah, they would go through the clean process, and then they would inject the fluid. At that time, I think it was Freon, and then they would go through a microcross filter, and we would look at the particulates.
Uh-huh.
And I came into the laboratory, and I saw a bunch of the samples there, and something caught my eye. And it didn't seem kind of right. So I looked at it, I said, let me look under the microscope and stuff. And I was just using just ambient light. But I saw things there that did not look right. It looked like rust.
Mm.
And the little bit of knowledge that I knew about the hypergols is that, combine it with an oxidizer, and rust is an oxidizer, things go boom. So I got a bunch of samples on there. I took to the material analysis laboratory, they dissection it, and indeed, they found rust in the boron tubes. And so there was instantly I can remember I used to drive my pad 3839, on my motorcycle, and I can remember looking out and seeing streamers of red flags where they had tagged all the gauges that could possibly, have contamination. So.
Right.
I wrote a paper. It was actually in 1989, I think NASA proceedings and stuff, where the material analysis came back and says there is a big possibility that we can lose the shuttle on people if these gauges got mixed, or the rest I got. And so based on that, I was nominated to receive the Silver Snoopy.
Yeah.
But I had decided to leave NASA contract. I went up to work for Digital Equipment Corporation, DEC, up in Massachusetts. And because I was leaving, why waste a Silver Snoopy?
Yep. Understood. But the nomination and the work that you did,
Mhm.
that's what I wanted to bring to light.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah. It was very gratifying work. I got
It
to
is.
that's the one thing I loved about KSC and stuff, like material analysis, lab quality stuff. It was all one family. It wasn't, hey, where's the money coming from before I can talk to you? The pass the funding money between contract. It didn't exist.
Mhm.
Well, it might exist, but I didn't see it too much.
It started coming into play more later after you had left and I was there.
Mhm.
That started getting to where, it kind of stayed in your lane, and that's not good. That's how accidents happen, right? You want to share
Absolutely.
information.
I had the opportunity to reread the Rogers Commission. If you go through the decision making on the day before, the Challenger went off, it's amazing. I mean, people doing song and dance, people that were so adamant about something. And then after a couple hours, they had another meeting and they changed their entire opinion.
Mhm.
Fly. And it was like, man, they must have got pressured or something.
That's what the problem was, right? Nobody had the guts to say no, right?
Yeah.
Not cleared for launch, and they just went, and that was wrong.
Yeah.
We won't get into the details.
Okay, Howard, your turn.
I would like to know, of all these places that you traveled all over the world,
Mhm.
what are the top one or two that I can't miss, that I need to go see?
Oh, Malaysia. Malaysia
Really?
by far. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Yeah. Kuala Lumpur, the rainforests, that are there, the hundreds of year old, tea, fields covering the mountains and stuff. There are reserves there where they still have tigers. They still have, elephants running wild. The Malaysian people are the most funnest, happiest, lovable people you ever want. The food is great. The weather's great. I enjoy my time when I go there. That's one of my
awesome.
favorite.
Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, someone else recommended Malaysia too. Howard, Peter. He said that
Peter
he
Unger.
enjoyed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's phenomenal. 70% of Malaysia is reserves. You cannot build on. They will not lose their heritage and stuff.
About
They're they're happy people.
All right, for those Zoolander fans out there, we are not going to kill the Prime Minister of Malaysia.
No.
Well, believe it or not, gentlemen, we've already been here for 40 minutes.
Oh, it goes by quick.
It does.
Well, this is
Every
the
time.
point. This is the point of the show where we give our words of wisdom. So my words of wisdom are this: just remember this good thought. Robotics engineers are never lonely because they're always making new friends. Chuck, your words of wisdom?
No, I think that I could have went with a day without that, but I don't know. I'm going to say my words of wisdom for my closing thoughts. Because my wisdom is one that should be savored and saved and spoken last in the world. Chris, do you have any parting thoughts that they like to say before we call it a day, my friend?
Well, actually, I do. And it's kind of fundamental to metrology in us, and it goes down to when Reagan, when he was with breaking down the wall and stuff, and it was the idea of trust but verify. Don't assume.
You like that? That's your phrase of the day?
Yeah, that works for me now.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah,
that.
my particular phrase is one I've learned in the when I was in the service. While you guys were saving the shuttle program, I was busy, fighting the wars, back in the day. And so, but there's two things I think, actions speak louder than words. I've said that my entire life.
Mhm.
And I had to, when I went through the academy, the TAC officer, I said, always said to us, if you're not solving the problem, you are the problem. So those are two of my key phrases that I've always tried to live by. And so solving the problem, and obviously then, that's the action. The action.
That's really similar, I think, to a Marine saying is lead, follow, get the hell out of the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys,
Well, we say
you're so full of philosophical wisdom there. Can I change my robotics engineer statement?
Well, the other thing that we didn't share with the audience, I can't believe that we didn't share it, is that this is probably one of the few times that you're going to see a conversation, a podcast with three people that were graciously awarded the exact same award.
Measurement Science, the Whittington Award. We're all Woodies.
We're all Woodies.
That's it.
All Woodies.
Woody Brothers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
we're
a lot
all-
of jokes after that, but we won't get into that.
Yeah. Chris, you were the first Woody Award recipient way back in what, 1945? Was it when you got yours?
Which is interesting because NCSL was founded, what, 1970, 69, somewhere in there, right?
Yeah, it was the same year I won the Woodhack, so I was a double player. I got a Winnington and Woodhack in the same year.
Yeah, yeah. And then Howard, you were 2 years later, I think.
I think it was 2019. I don't remember the year. Sorry.
Well, it's easy to remember. So, okay. Well, listen, gentlemen, it's Chris. As we said a couple seconds ago, never enough time. I guarantee we're going to have you back again, and probably we'll have you back. We'll pick a topic where we can explore more of a singular item, whether it be uncertainty analysis or something that we really want to spend a lot of time on.
Or guitar riffs. You never know.
Or
Yeah,
guitar riff.
I would just think, Howard, you drag the drums out, and I'm going to plug in the amp.
Yeah.
You know, we ought to do, Howard. We ought to get a foursome is get Paul on board and get Paul and Howard, Paul and Chris to do a little bit of guitar action at the same
Yes.
time.
I love it.
Yeah, and maybe we can invite my good buddy Jeff Willie and bring in some
I'd like
harmonica.
to have Jeff on board. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've gone to see him play a couple times when I lived in Orlando. Haven't been able to get to see him lately.
Well, he's moved now. Jeff has moved. He's married and happy and living up
Yes.
north on a farm. So he's a very happy guy now.
Mhm.
So we're very happy for you, Jeff. If you're listening to this,
Absolutely.
drop us a line and tell us how you're doing. By the way, Jeff. So with that being said, let's call it a day. I want to thank our sponsor. We didn't thank our sponsor all day long for supporting this podcast, National Association of Proficiency Testing. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
As I always like to say, proficiency testing is the only true way you can prove your technical competency. So if you don't use the services of NAPT, do it some other way because you need to participate in order to prove your technical competence. So with that being said, Chris, thank you so much for participating. We look forward to the next time
Thank
we
you, sir.
chat.
Great
Howard,
talking to
I'm
you
sure
again.
we'll see you soon.
Yeah,
You
well,
bet.
in a couple
All right.
weeks.
Gentlemen,
All right.
I
Howard,
look
see
forward
ya.
to seeing you soon down the road.
Peace.